call it training map. So this is the first slide I presented to you, and I'm going to sort of break it into pieces now a little bit. So what we're going to look at tonight is training, right? Literally how we plan our training sessions, and as I said before, a little bit of a different angle to do that. Okay, so we're going to populate this screen as we go along. So when the first port of call when we're training is the 11v11 game, right? So and I'm even talking about foundation phase kits, right? Because eventually foundation phase players playing 5v5 or 7v7 or 2v2 or whatever system you're in, eventually it ends up at 11v11. Okay. So recognizing the 11v11 game as part of our training program is a good start point for what we do. Okay. It is almost, and I'll explain the almost later, it is almost the biggest, most complete thing you will probably ever do in a training session. All right. Obviously, you don't go 12v12, right? So we're going to look at that 11v11 as one side of it. Then, of course, you drop down to things like 10v10, 9v9. The other end of the spectrum, you start with your 1v1s, 2v2s, 3v3s, and we fill in the rest. Okay. So our games, so me versus you, starting at 1v1 and ending with 11v11. Okay, so that's the spectrum of what we do. And then a little one before that is our unopposed. Okay, and I'm going to explain what this means a little bit more in a second. We're going to look at what I call ball to player ratio. All right, so this orange one, okay, before you get into the me versus you and then us versus them, is this idea of technical training, unopposed work, ball mastery, technical exercises, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so I'm going to step out of the map just to go through a glossary. All right, I want to ask you all to open the chat. I'm going to kind of ask some questions along the way to drum up some answers from it. Okay, so if you can be sort of fingers at the ready, none of this is going to be really stressful, but it will be good to get just a little bounce around of ideas. Okay, so 1v0 or 1 versus a half. Okay, 1v0 is my kind of way of, I suppose, of linking in this idea that I have the ball, but I have no opponent. Okay, so this guy is doing a technical drill around passing. It's him versus no one. Okay, it's the only focus is on him getting the ball cleanly, whatever, over the other side to his mate. Okay, so that's my idea of 1 versus 0. Okay, one guy doing something with the ball without opponents. Okay, now this is what I call 1 versus a half. All right, and I don't use it all that often, except in certain circumstances. When I don't know, maybe I'm working with a coach and we've kind of cycled through some of this before. The idea of a half is instead of an opponent, the other players add some interference to what you're doing. Okay, so this passing exercise for me to get the ball from there to there, there's no defender, there's no interference. I am versus nothing other than some environmental kind of things. Okay, here the object, for example, of this ball mastery exercise would be to dribble through stations at various different times and dribble your way around the area randomly. And the half is the traffic. Okay, so the other players that you must keep an eye on, they will get in your way, they will run past you, they will make you stop, they might make you turn, they might make you dribble quicker, you might actually collide with them and lose your ball. Okay, depending on your age and your level and stuff like that, and the size of the area. Okay, so this is what I call 1 versus a half. Okay, so you've got no opponent, but you've got stuff, people, players getting in the way. And then my first question, right? So if this is 1v0 and this is 1 versus a half, what is 0 versus 0? Can anyone have a little stab at what 0 versus 0 might mean? Okay, and I'll give it the old maximum 20, 30 seconds of Zoom silence, just to have someone pop a quick answer in the chat. 0 versus 0. Anyone having a little stab at 0 versus 0? Ball mastery? Watching a demo? Okay, so 0 versus 0 in my terminology, in my terminology is no ball. Okay, so we might be doing game related stuff somehow. So it might be this doggies, shuttle runs, or whatever. It might be, I don't know, a psychology thing, a team talk, a sit down at the whiteboard kind of thing. All right, so there's no ball involved. Okay, so there's nothing versus nothing in a sense. All right. So in terms of the what comes before the 1 versus 0, you can coach without the ball involved. Okay, it'll be done in a different way in a different mode. Okay, so I just wanted to reference that as well. Now, one of the things we're going to talk about is the ratio of ball to player. Okay, so I assume you can quite clearly see that the ratio of ball to player here is 1 to 2. Okay, so for every ball involved, there's 2 players involved. Okay, ratio really quickly. Ratio of ball to player for this one. Someone fire in the answer. Yeah, good. 1 to 1. Okay, Steve's put in the answer. All right. Ratio of ball to player in this one here. 1 to 22. Great. Okay. So hopefully you get the idea pretty quick. All right. So it's the idea that down here, well, certainly here, we have this one versus half. Okay. So we have 1 to 1 ball to player ratio, 1 to 2, and then all the way up to 1 to 22. All right. So I'm going to ask the same question now, but I'm going to make it things a little bit trickier. Okay. Ball to player ratio in this exercise. Don't be afraid to have a stab. 1 to 2, Steve says. Anyone think anything different? Okay. What about this one? So we started some questions coming out now. Okay. So we've had 1 to 2, we've had 1 to 8, and we've had a little bit of I'm not exactly sure. Okay. 1 to 13, 1 to 4, Steve said. Right. We're jumping around a little bit, which is good. Right. So this is, yeah, we've got a couple of answers in for this. So it's 1 to 13, 1 to 12. So Mark says this is 1 to 12. Steve says it's 1 to 4. Okay. Lastly, then, what about this one? So 5 outfield reds, 5 outfield whites, 2 goalkeepers. 12. I don't think there'll be any comeback. 12. Good. Okay. So this is where it gets a little bit. I don't want this to turn into a math lesson because I'm not very good at math. All right. And I want to talk about this idea of a negative ratio. Okay. Now, if there are mathematicians in the room, I don't know what the real mathy thing is for a negative ratio. I know it's some kind of thing, but I'm looking at these 3 pictures, for example, and there's an argument about this one. All right. So is it 1 to 2? Inside the playing area, it's 1 to 2. But if I've got 8 kids at my football session, it's 1 to 8. Okay. because they've got footballs at their feet, but they're not doing anything with it. They're not being especially productive. Okay. And I call it a negative ratio because actually, beyond the 1 to 2, there's six not doing anything at all. Okay. Similarly here, and this one and this a small sided game, they're kind of easier to compare because they're both 1 to 12 in a sense, right? So you've got your 2 versus 2 that's going on here. And then you've got, and I don't know what these players are doing exactly. They're waiting, or they're going to join in, or they're going to do whatever. I'm presenting it as I found it. Okay. So this 1 to 12, I hope you can see, is far different from this 1 to 12 because this player here, who's not um, affecting the ball directly, has a response to make to what the ball is doing. Right? So there's involvement. There's at least a mental involvement in the game. Whereas this, I would call a negative ratio because yes, it's 1 to 12, but there's 4 and there's 8 doing nothing. They are doing very little or waiting or whatever it is exactly they're doing. All right. So we want to have a good look now at what these true ratios mean.